Okay. All right. Ellen Pompeo calls Katherine Heigl ahead of her time for calling out long hours at work. She was 100% right. Now, what I remembered about this was Katherine Heigl was always deemed very hard to work with. That is a ongoing legacy of hers. I don't think that I think they use the term in this article. It says blackballed or blacklisted from the industry. She's worked very consistently.
She got specifically kicked and killed off of Grey's Anatomy.
Yes, that show, but not blacklisted from the industry. She worked. She had her own weird Homeland / Scandal ripoff called State of Affairs that I had a soft spot for all 13 episodes, and then it was axed. Made me very sad.
What has she done recently?
Then she did Suits. After that, she had a bunch of episodes, and then she's been. I looked it up. She was in a couple of other. She's still acting in things on a regular basis. So she's not blacklisted from the industry. But I was tempted to be like, look at these people whining, and I do think that there's room for nuance in this discussion. Because I don't disagree necessarily with the sentiment, but I also think there's a reality of the industry they work in that a lot of them tend to ignore.
Well, they're wording it in a certain way, knowing that the public doesn't understand what their work days are like. They're saying, we had a 17-hour work day, but like not all of that involved working.
It would the better argument would be for the non-performers having the longer work day because they work the same hours and they're doing more manual labor and setting up, tearing down sets and stuff like that. So it says Katherine Heigl was labeled difficult and unprofessional after speaking out in 2009 about the extremely long production hours that the cast and crew had to endure on Grey's Anatomy. After 6 seasons and one candid interview, Katherine Heigl found herself effectively blacklisted from the industry for perhaps speaking a truth no one was ready to hear or acknowledge. That's what Ellen Pompeo is suggesting in her latest episode of the Tell Me with Ellen Pompeo podcast with Grey's Anatomy co-star Kate Walsh. Heigl worked alongside Pompeo on the first 6 seasons of the ABC medical drama, which is on like season 92 now. It's not 90. It's like very high up there. It's still going.
Is it ever gonna end?
I love that some of the art because I was like looking into the actress and it's like a bunch of them were like it's like her saying like, will the show ever end? And like Ellen Pompeo advocates for the end of Grey's Anatomy.
Like there's no way that hospital is still open. I've never watched the show and I know there's been at least 4 shootings there.
Yes.
Like, no more.
You can't have that many doctors sleeping with each other in on-call rooms without getting some type of health code violation.
Well, but also they had like outbreaks of diseases and it's like caught on fire and then there was a shooting and then there was like a bomb threat. Like
that's what I loved about House. It was basically the most interesting place in the world. So it says.
But they made that one work because Gregory House was like a specialist in solving unsolved cases. So like cases that couldn't go anywhere else would end up at his hospital because of that. Like that makes it more interesting. Whereas like as far as I know for Grey's Anatomy,
it's just like completely
it's
random.
any hospital except all this crazy stuff happens all the time.
I do wonder where you go to a hospital to find a doctor who looks as handsome as Dr. Chase. I don't think that's a real thing.
Or Hugh Laurie, he's also handsome.
We were having a conversation about traditional beauty standards earlier.
Right.
I'm half kidding, but I do always laugh at the doctors. I'm like, are doctors that good looking? I have no idea. Like it's none of the doctors I've ever gone to have looked like that. But
if you're a doctor, if you could let us know if you're good looking,
I think attractiveness is positively correlated with intelligence.
Well, people
which helps you get through medical school. I'm sure.
And it's trust too. People trust good looking people. So
only hire good looking surgeons if they're not going to trust you if you're not.
What I was going to say is this article about work hours comes at an interesting time. I don't know if you follow this at all, but California passed, officially legislated that the
30-hour work week?
32-hour work
32-hour work week.
So they basically cut 8 hours off, which is similar to legislation that passed last year in Iceland. And they had done this years-long study of different sectors and different types of work, hands-on stuff versus teachers, and they basically in a combination of ways to reduce the work week to 32 hours found overall people were much happier. They performed better in their jobs. So this movement towards reduced hour work week is interesting, and like in some ways this headline, like I totally get the like I want to be like, oh, an actress complaining about her like successful career, but like it does come at a time when a lot of people, especially as our culture completely moved to work from home,
maybe that's compatible with ordinary jobs, but theirs is extraordinary and has to have a certain level of output, and I don't think they can keep that up if they were to reduce hours to 32 a week.
And like if you think about like nurses that work 12-hour shifts, right? Like if you work a 12-hour shift 4 days a week, but then the next week you have more time off, or like you work on a rotating schedule, like, yeah, you wouldn't say that you would be like, yeah, I work crazy long hours, but you also know that you're compensated in time off differently, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that she's accurately evaluating like workday versus like she has the option to rest in between movies or whatever.
Show like this, they work 9 months on, 3 months off. So they get a summer vacation, essentially.
Sort of like teachers.
So, yeah. So the idea, first of all, we are in an age where work-life balance is a very large discussion that people have on a regular basis. I will criticize her because I think that the people at the highest echelon of this industry, meaning that the lead in a show where she's literally she's literally that character, she's being compensated very well. And we're in an age now where people talk about how they have to have 2 jobs to survive, 3 jobs to survive. They're working those amount of hours in a day for a fraction of what you're making, a fraction of what they're making to do a job that, well, I can acknowledge is not the easiest job in the world. I think a lot of people think acting is easy. It is not. But saying that your the woe is me thing would fall more to me on the crew than on the actors.
Well, it's not that anyone is assuming acting is easy, but we're saying it's easy for them to lose touch with what other people's lives are like.
Yep. So she says during her appearance, the difficult as she was pegged then, Heigl very candidly spoke about working conditions. She told Letterman, "I'm going to keep saying this because I hope it embarrasses them," per the New York Post. She went on to say she'd finished a 17-hour workday, which she called cruel and mean. You always have the option to quit. You do not have to take that job with those long hours. If you can find a set that can do this in less time, that is up to you, or you can change profession.
She could have changed the wording so it didn't make her sound like such a victim. Like she could have just said it's very arduous.
Yes.
It's difficult to maintain.
I just wish she'd given more details. Like during your 17-hour workday, right? If you're an actor, presumably you're filming, you spend a certain amount of time in hair and makeup, which sounds like not your job, but like it is. You have to get ready to be your character. Is she also including times that she spent rehearsing her lines? Is she including like, they don't really do press junkets for TV shows, but like what is encompassing a 17-hour workday, and how often do you have to work a 17-hour workday, right? Like I used to work for a nonprofit and we would have large scale events, and during our conferences I would work, easily a 17-hour workday, right? But like I didn't do it all the time. It was just during these specific things that needed more attention.
The star of the show is likely going to have like Stephen Amell would talk about when he was starring in the show Arrow. That's 18-hour work days, 6 days a week, which you have to be in fantastic shape, especially when you do a job like that, where it's not just walk and talk. He's doing a lot of physical activity. And they would show these transformations. Like everyone who was on the show looked like kind of like bland and like generic, and then they all got in just tremendous. He was already in tremendous shape, but all of the actors just got in incredible shape because they had to physically do the job that they were doing.
And so, do they count like the time they spend at the gym in that 18-hour?
I'm guessing,
workday?
Yeah, like that's part of your workday.
Which I don't begrudge them, but like it is interesting to be like, okay, so your 17-hour workday, you're also like doing these certain things, where someone who works a 12-hour shift at a factory is probably on their feet consistently for 12 hours.
She was publicly labeled difficult and unprofessional per The Hollywood Reporter in 2013, which with it also being noted, it was problematic that she publicly aired grievances. Yeah, that would be the biggest problem. And now in Hollywood, all they do is publicly air grievances, but there are aspects you're not allowed to question. One of which is like, look, if you're making 23 episodes a year, and it takes 8 days to shoot an episode, roughly, or 8 days of turnover, and you have to go in, like, you're going to work long hours, and the crew is going to work those same long hours for substantially less money. I would be more on board with them doing this on behalf of the crew than just for the sake of the actors. And maybe that's an argument, a nitpick on my part about framing, that I think it seems a little bit detached from when you make that much money. And like I said, it doesn't solve your problems, but there is such thing as like when you're compensated well, it makes your job easier.
Would you think there's any weight to the counter argument of like crew, while they're like, we recognize that they're often like the unappreciated, unsung heroes of production, if a lead actress doesn't say, hey, these working conditions are too long, there's no ability to have a trickle-down effect for the crew. Like, I know she's not talking about it, so it's sort of moot in this point. But, like, do you think that there's any, like, weight to the idea that, like, a high-paid actress who is dependent on the show, if she's saying, no, not just me, but, like, all of us are working too much, don't like this schedule, you know, it gives the crew a leg to stand on, right?
Yes,
because especially
I
as a crew member, you wouldn't want to complain because, you know, I don't know.
You're imminently more replaceable than the lead of a show. No, you're not wrong about that. So it says, Heigl defended herself in the op-ed in 2021 in the wake of the Me Too movement. Modern audiences had begun recontextualizing the experiences of women in Hollywood in light of exposed truths about the industry. I take offense with that because long work hours don't just affect women. The rest of it is
classic
fine.
Patriarchy telling us what affects women.
It is.
Well, I guess what they're saying is that when women are labeled as difficult to work with, it's just stereotyping them as neurotic, complaining.
Yep. And when a man does it, it's
just taking up too much space.
And when a man does it, he's just eccentric and hard to work with.
Yeah, I think there are definitely different consequences to complaining about this based on the gender.
Okay.
There's something to it, but I just don't like when they point it out, because they pointed out like this quote.
You
like,
can say it because you'll only be able to capture it.
Of course, let's slam a woman and call her ungrateful.
Yes.
That's annoying.
Like I said, I do understand that you kind of need a top-down approach to getting these types of things changed. I have this other article here from the Hollywood Reporter about global unions calling to end long hours culture for film and TV workers. But to do that, you would have to drastically and completely overhaul the nature. Let's put it this way. These industries are too specialized and the need for content output too great that they simply cannot do that right now. That they are, if they're going to make all the, like we've got Amazon, we've got Netflix, we've got Hulu, we've got all of these streaming services, we've got movies, we've got shorts on, content creators on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. There's a million ways you can consume entertainment now. So to me, it's like this will only get worse, likely, not better, because there just won't be enough money to go around to hire all the extra people that you would need to give everyone a 12-hour workday. It's just not realistic, especially if we're talking about the lead actor. You can't clone the lead actor. You have to use the lead actor.
Well, it would make things take longer too, right? You'd have to pay salaries for a longer amount of time.
Yep.
And I think that would probably throw off production schedules. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I was just pointing out, like, the leads are doing this at these long hours because they feel like it. They feel it's a passion of theirs. Not because they have to work.
Yeah.
The crew are working because they have to work. And also ordinary people who quite often are working from home these days are working because they have to work, and work has invaded their home space.
Yeah.
So that's why it comes off as entitled.
Yeah.
It's easy to tell.
In this article, they talk about how they found 60-hour work weeks to be normal across the film and television industry, leading to excessive hours, insufficient rest, and life-threatening levels of fatigue. I have friends.
Life-threatening?
I have friends who work in the industry who have been very passionately campaigning to have hours, so they don't have to work 18 hours. So 12 hours on, 8,
Wait, how is this life-threatening though?
I don't know.
Like if you go too long without sleep deprivation, your body starts to shut down.
Yeah.
Like, I do believe that sleep has an impact on the body. Like,
no, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
To me, what's interesting about all of this is that it's sort of a function of like hustle culture.
I was going to bring that up.
Like, if I just work a little bit harder, if I pour, like, even if you are like, if you're a working actress, you haven't made it to Katherine Heigl's level, you're lower down on the totem pole. If you work several 20-hour days and this movie takes off, it could change your life, right? If you're a cinematographer, because within Hollywood, we have to recognize that probably we only know the actors and directors, right? But there are probably people within the industry that they know, oh, that guy's really talented. That costumer is excellent, And
I know this up through cinematographer.
If you just hustle a little bit more. I know this of like my friends who work in finance, like they'll work crazy hours, and especially during certain seasons, because they're like, but if I put in the effort now, I'll get that promotion later. And I think there is something admirable about that. But like, as just to generalize Western culture, we do often put work ahead of everything else to the expense of our family lives and our spiritual lives and things like that. And like we are in a weird position where we desperately need to, because we're in a time of economic uncertainty, and at the same time, like, people are generally not satisfied by that. So I can't fault people for wanting to reduce the hours, but you know, they also have to reflect that they are feeding into it every time they agree to work, you know, because of that hope that this project is going to take off.
There's an interesting kind of comparison here where like in this industry, maybe it's like seen as like because, you know, like the actors don't want to act like they do it for the money. They want to act like they do it for the love and for the art and for the passion of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But then there's also financial means tied to that. So there's like a weird comparison where you can't really say it's about doing it for the money, because that would be untoward. But it's absolutely not in most cases, but in many cases going to be about, there's actors who come out later and say, I only did this movie for the money. But you know, that's not cool
Why
to
do we
say.
fault them? Like, it is weird that we fault them.
You shouldn't fault them for that. That's like actually one example recently is they talk about how Nicolas Cage took all these like B tier movies to pay, because he had to pay off his divorce or whatever, and everything. And this time it was kind of looked at as like, oh, good for him paying off his.
Well, I guess people take issue with it because their output is supposed to be art.
Yes.
And other people's output is just productivity.
Yes. But it's not.
But it's that, like, can you not produce art productively?
And it's where art meets commerce, because it's art, but it's still something you're selling.
Right. They
someone.
have to intersect, but I guess people feel that like your personal passion should be in that output.
Yeah.
Not just the motivation of the money.
I get that, but I also think that like it's a little bit unrealistic, and we romanticize the idea of the starving artist in a way that's like not fair. I don't think that, like, you know, it's what leads people to take internships that pay no money, and they're like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing for my craft, for my career. And it's like, no, like, you need to think more critically about the decisions you're making.
Yep.
I don't fault artists. I mean, like, hopefully they wouldn't do projects they didn't feel like they couldn't do justice for. On the other hand, like, I do think that, like, you know, the same way a talented graphic designer might be like, yeah, I really loved this one campaign I worked on, but that one I just did because the client was going to pay me well. Like, I wouldn't fault them for that.
Nope.
And I think they have creativity and the artistry.
Yep.
Yeah, fair point.
So we will, I think this is an interesting discussion, because it really is pull out the kind of the curtain of Hollywood and see how all that stuff works. But I'll keep a closer eye on for articles like this, because the article that I had found from the Hollywood Reporter about work hours and fatigue and stuff like that was linked back to something like, I remembered a friend of mine posted, if not that article, something very similar about the unions and the work hours and the behind the scenes. It's a very blue collar world behind the scenes in that industry. So we'll see where that goes.
I was listening to an interview with a husband and wife screenwriting team, and they were talking about how, like, they had met when they were fairly young, new in the industry, and like, it's the kind of field where like you may work and get on a project that is like Grey's Anatomy and just never ends, right? Like, they were talking about it from the perspective of like getting to be a writer on like a soap opera is actually like a really good gig.
Oh yeah,
because like they never end. There's always characters, but you know, it's exciting to work on the big movies, but that only lasts for so long.
Yep.
And I think it's very different from, you know, a lot of the rest of the world, but it does resemble like seasonal workers in other industries, right?
Yep. If I had been honest with myself when I went to school for film, I would have been honest with myself and said, like, I don't really want to work freelance because I don't want to have to constantly be looking for work. It's a pain. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to find a way to, if you can't get a recurring gig that's like a soap opera where you're working all year round and you're going to continuously get that work, you have to decide whether that's really the industry for you to work in.
Well, for actors, it also depends on if you want to be known for your name or what you've been in.
Yeah. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.